Today I wanted to talk to you about a topic in which a lot of photographers and artists kind of come across at some point when they start out, or even when they're experienced, is what's your specialty or what's your niche? Well, I don't believe you should have one. There's an incredible quote that gets circled around a lot, and that quote actually is only half the quote, and it is "Jack of all trades is a master of none." But the actual full quote is, "A jack of all trades is a master of none, but is oftentimes better than a master of one." And I think that is exactly the synopsis of what this video is about. It's about why you shouldn't specialize or why you shouldn't pigeonhole, particularly if you're starting out. Now, before I kind of go into it, I also want to make the point that if you find the one thing that you love to do and you do it very, very well, then this is not for you. This is for the people who struggle with what they want to find. Like myself, I started out as a landscape photographer. I was doing sunrise, sunset photos, I was doing astrophotography, I was doing long exposure, then eventually start taking photos of people, got into portraiture, eventually got into commercial work and start doing headshots and corporate events and any form of stock imagery, real estate photography. Because if you look at my social media now, you'd probably pigeonhole me and say I'm a street photographer. And in a way I am, with what I show, but that's not all I do. As much as I love street photography, and it's something that when I go away, I love going into the city and I love spending time framing up shots and looking for light and getting good compositions and trying to showcase that place as best I can. I also love going hiking and I love going out into the hills and I love spending as much time away from major cities as I do in them, because for me it's a balance. I do love landscape photography and I do love astrophotography, but I also love street photography and I spend a lot of time doing portraits. So for me, the idea of pigeonholing yourself never worked. And I don't think it works for a lot of people, but we're all told that we have to find that thing we're good at. Like, you could pigeonhole me and say I'm a storyteller, but even that has such a broad range in what you are able to do or what you're able to show. This isn't just seen today. I mean, the very founders of street photography were just as guilty of this as I am. Joel Meyerowitz, for example, is an incredible photographer who started doing street photography through New York. Has some incredible books where he's done stuff with the 9/11 memorial. He also has a book called Wildflowers, which was a complete look back through all his gallery and seeing all the times that flowers appeared and put it together and made an incredible photo book. He also did a book called Cape Light, which was a book based on his time spent in Cape Cod. All three very, very different books, but all three just as powerful and just as incredible stories, but all done by the same artist. So there was no way that he could pigeonhole himself in one specific type of photography. Otherwise he wouldn't have done two, if not all of those books. Because if he had have only focused on what he did when he started and did street photography of just people in New York, he never would have come out with the Cape Light book on Cape Cod. Or you switch that up and go to a modern day photographer like Joe Greer. Joe Greer got very big because of his work in the Pacific Northwest, but now has completely changed and he spends his time documenting the streets in New York, and he's currently done or doing a project throughout Nashville. But again, Joe Greer actually had a great way of putting this in a saying. He says, I don't classify myself as a street photographer. I don't classify myself as a landscape photographer. I classify myself as a life photographer. And I love that, because for me, if you're out with friends or if you're a landscape photographer, the feeling you get when you take a photo that means something more to you doesn't just happen because of where you are and what you see. It happens because of how you feel at the time. So if you're out in street photography, there's no reason why, if you're able to compose a photo and use good shape and good light in a landscape image, why can't you translate that into a street image? Now, I'm not going to say it translates completely. It takes time to work. But it's no reason why you can't take good portraiture. There's no reason why you can't learn how to do good architecture photography. All of these things have very, very similar elements that get completely separated because we say they have to be. But there's no reason why you can't do a bit of everything and see what you like best. Like, I will never go, I am an incredible real estate photographer, I am an incredible commercial photographer, I am these. I love doing all of them, and I've done bits of all of them, but they don't define what I am as a photographer. I am a photographer. I am not just a real estate photographer. I am not a street photographer. I'm not a portrait photographer. I'm just a photographer. And in those elements, I still look for the exact same things. I look for shape. I look for light. I wait for the frame to come to fruition. And that is what I would like to be defined as when it comes to my work. And if you're starting out, I encourage you highly to try landscape photography. Go out and try astrophotography. Take your friends out camping and do some adventure photography. Go into the streets of a major city where you live and spend a day just documenting and see how the light moves. Grab your friends in and take them out and do portrait photography. Learn how to understand light in different light conditions. Because all of those will end up serving you in another way down the line if you want to do something with this. As an example of that, this was the first photo book I ever created. Now, this photo book was on Vietnam, where I was lucky enough to spend a month traveling around. Now, in this book, I'm going to cycle photos as I go through it, but in this book, if I was to only focus on the landscapes of Vietnam, I would have missed out on the people of Vietnam. Or if I was to only focus on portraits of people in Vietnam, I would have missed out on the environmental shots of people going about their day, and to give context into how vast and how diverse this beautiful country is. And by able to take in elements of all of them, I was able to come up with my story of what I think Vietnam is. And that was what made this book special for me, was it wasn't just a type of photography, it was photos of a place. And in a place, it includes people, it includes them doing their daily activities, it includes environmental portraits, it includes set-up photos, and just as much as it includes landscape photography. Because all of those come together to make one coherent story that when you look at it as a viewer, you not only experience it through the landscape, you look at it through the faces of the people, through the wrinkles on their skin, through the shape of the land, through the depth of the valleys. Because when you put all of them together, you end up with a story that showcases a place as a whole, not just an individual type or an individual element in that place. It becomes the story of the place as one whole story. So if I can encourage you to do one thing, it would be to force yourself to try something new. Challenge yourself to go out and do street photography. Challenge yourself to go do portrait photography. Challenge yourself to do architectural photography. Because you will lose nothing by trying. In fact, you'll just gain knowledge that could even add to the stuff you already know and that you want to shoot currently. Because there's no problem with niching yourself if what you do is what you want to do. If you found that your portrait photography and you want to take photos of models and you love styling shoots, that's incredible. Do it as much as you can, do it as often as you can. But if that's something that you're starting out doing and you find that you start to lose a little bit of a spark towards that, don't limit yourself to that, because eventually you'll just end up putting the camera down and not using it. Which, if you can pick up and try and do something different and recreates that spark, then it's worth its weight in gold. So next time someone asks what type of photography you do, or what specialty you go into, or what's your niche, just say you're a photographer, because you are. And what type of niche you do or what specialty you do doesn't really matter as much as how much enjoyment you get when you take photos. So if I can leave you with one last thing, I encourage anybody who watches this, and if you've stayed this long, thank you very much. I encourage you to do one thing for me, which is pick a different style of photography and try and create the best version of that photo you can.